Literary literacy currently in Spain and in the Nordic countries through the experiences of protagonists. This is the key of this gathering, Nordic Days, since 2010, the first edition of this multidisciplinary festival devoted to Nordic and Latin American cultures. It is an important platform to exchange cultures and ideas. The alliance with Fundación Telefónica extends to the collaboration with the Norwegian embassy, and also with regard to the association that promotes Norwegian literature abroad. We have with us Gunnhild Øyehaug and Marina L, with myself here related to culture. For me, it is a privilege to be here. The main reason is as a reader. Gunnhild Øyehaug, Norwegian, 47 years old, I think she is, as author. She's a teacher at the Creative Writing Academy of Westland, and at the beginning of this conversation she was explaining that she tries to help people find the best in themselves. She has a master's in compared literature from the University of Bergen. She writes poetry. She has an important number of stories. She's been pre-selected for the National Book Award, and she should have even more awards than what she has. And I think that part of the success of this encounter is that probably somebody who doesn't know her will probably go straight to knowing her. Marina L is probably, it is easier to be known here in Spain. She's born in Barcelona in 1983. She published a novel, Había una fiesta, a few years ago. She's got a degree in humanities. Her texts are close to myself because she's an expert in music, also in literary research and feminism. All of these signs are part of her identity. She worked at a publishing house in several different publishing houses, Glenat, Leña, Penguin Random House. She moved to Sweden for 5 years. She lived in Gothenburg, researching new voices of Scandinavian literature, and she collaborated with digital outlets such as Playground, Tribune. Now she's back in Barcelona. She's translating Swedish authors, and hopefully will be able to present her new novel shortly. I would like to welcome both of them. Thank you for being here, for participating this conversation. It is a pleasure for me to get you to be here and to be here with you. We're going to be talking about literary contexts. It's interesting that you that we all know how other people work in different places. It seems that our regions should be more connected, but I think that language is still key. We have to continue developing, researching, to see how we can get closer between cultures. We need translations. We need, well, Marina is an expert in this. I suppose she knows different languages, and she's got in touch with different contexts. What does Marina have to say about this? And also, good afternoon, Gunnhild.
2013. I realized that the market, the publisher house market, didn't know so much about Scandinavian. They have only classics like Astrid Lindgren or Selma Lagerlöf, but we have like a hole there. And nowadays it's great because I think that the new publisher house and independent ones are looking for new authors and translating them. And if you go to a bookstore here in Spain, now the frame for Scandinavian literature is changing, and it's not only crime and only the classics. They are starting to translate authors and poetry from Scandinavian. And I think it's really, really important, the paper of the translators there, because they investigate new authors and they give knowledge to the publisher house, which authors are doing things in Scandinavia. And I think that the translators are that gate to the Spanish market and in Scandinavian authors.
Yo no sé,
Gunnhild, would you like to add something to this? The way in which we perceive a language such as yours in Latin American countries. It is very complicated to understand just the writing in the roads.
Well, you know, I can say maybe a more general comment on translation, because that is one of the really great privileges that has come my way the last 7 years, that my books have been translated into different countries, many different countries, languages. And it's, yeah, I really do feel that translators are incredibly important to make us understand each other. And as Marina said, that now you have, you know, you kind of have the classics, you have kind of an image of what a country's literature is based only on the bestsellers, perhaps. And then they can be hopefully a door opener for a wider perspective into more nuanced look on what contemporary writing is in each country. And I think that, for instance, for Norwegian literature, I think that a writer like Karl Ove Knausgård was very, very important to his great success, was something that opened doors for other Norwegian writers as well, because suddenly there was an interest in what goes on in contemporary Norwegian literature. And then we're not only interested perhaps in the autobiographical or the autofiction line of writing that has been very strong in Norway for the last decade, but also what kind of other things. So, and that is, I do think that that was also happening in Norway. There are several independent publishing houses being established and looking for translation. Some of them are only publishing translated literature, which is, I think it's crucial for the development of a nation's or a country's understanding of yeah, your own context, what kind of world you're writing and living in.
I think that a lot of times you only have access to books that are translated to English, for example, and for a lot of writers, Spanish one, Norwegian one, if you have the opportunity to be translated in English, you know that a lot of people can read you from many countries. But if you have a language, Spanish is a language that they speak in Latin American, and we have that market too. But in the case of Swedish literature or Norwegian literature, it's different, because if you don't read, if you don't understand the language, you cannot read, and you don't know what the authors are saying, or which is the magical thing there. So the translation it's really, really important in that case. And I think a lot of times English is the first door to open that world of the authors. But if you don't have that opportunity, you have to meet a lot of translator people that are translating from different languages that is not the big ones.
Yeah, and I think also for me, I can just say that it's also been quite wonderful to be translated, because I do write, I don't know if you know that Norway has 2 official languages that are both variants of the same Norwegian. And I write the minor one, which is, I don't think, maybe 25% of the population has as the first language. And there's always a lot of, I'm always placed within the new Norwegian, which is called context, which I don't really always feel at home in. So when it's being translated, that is no longer an issue. Then it's just my text speaking for itself, and it's not the kind of language background that I come from that is important. It's the text itself.
Hablando de
Talking about communication, we are able to organize this gathering, thanks to Flavia, Claire, Magdalena, and Berna, who are helping us with this communication task. We have also a great team here at Fundación Telefónica that are enabling us to organize this conversation. At the beginning, I wanted to highlight that in August 2017, the New Yorker literary critic said, "At long last, we have Øyehaug's literature translated into English after 13 years. It seemed that a long time had gone by since the beginning of her writing. So how do you relate to your writing when your work has been published? Do you want to look back, and it is different, the debut that you have at the beginning of your career? In the case of Marina, many things happen. Then many things happen between one work and the next, and also depending on where you are, the different countries, cultures, you are welcomed differently. How have you experienced this? In the case of Marina, I'm interested by the fact that I will ask you about your writing hat, so to speak. How do you write in Sweden or in Barcelona? Is there a difference in this context, or does what you see in the street, does it have an impact on you? I know there's a lot of questions in one, but I wanted to have a sort of more informal conversation, because in a certain way your works might lose a little bit of their essence with all these differences.
¿Quién empieza?
Who would like to start?
Gunnhild?
Yeah. Okay, I'll just start with the first question. For instance, if I look back on my writing when I leave it, I mean, Knots, which came out in Spain, I think last year. I have them placed in the background. That was published in Norway in 2004. So it was my second book, and I was a very young writer when I was kind of trying to figure out how to write. Because my first book was in 1998, which was a collection of poetry. But I had been writing short stories from a very young age, so I kind of thought of short stories as my genre. But for some reason, after having studied literature for a year in the university, I think I just had this epiphany of how to write poetry. So my first book was written quite quickly, and I haven't really continued writing poetry. But then the short stories developed, and I had been writing them before the poetry collection came out as well. So I think it's very interesting for me to see now that Knots have been published. It was republished in Norway in 2012, where I added 4 short stories that had been written after it came out, because they belonged in that universe. And that is the book that has been translated into English and Spanish and several other languages too. And it's very interesting to kind of meet myself from a very early age. I think I was 25 when I was writing them, and I am And I can see in the book how my writing developed up until actually the last short story in that book, which is, I feel like, a turning point in my own writing. I kind of figured out another way of writing through burnout. So, so in that way, I'm kind of forced to kind of look at my work from an early start. And I don't really spend much time with a book when I have finished it. But I do spend time with it in the sense that there's always something I want to explore in my next book. So there's always, when I think of my books, I think there are 9 or something like that, and I think of them as some kind of whole, but I'm kind of exploring different themes or kind of ideas that have grown out of the previous one. So, so in that sense, they always kind of develop out of each other. But I very seldom go back and read my own work. But in the case with Knots, I've had to talk about it quite a few times, and it's very interesting. And I'm actually quite happy that I wrote it. I'm happy to see that some of the themes that I've written about in Knots, I have left. I won't write about them. But I'm glad that I was young and fearless and wrote about the things that I really wanted to write about, and I didn't take any. Well, yeah, that was a very long answer, and I'll come back to maybe some of it.
In my case, it's similar to. I started to write when I was a child, and I think that I started with poetry too. And later, to me, was so important in the social media and the blogs at the beginning, in the starting of the millennium, because I read a lot of poetry in some blogs. And later, when I start to write in magazines that they publish in internet too, so we make contact with a lot of authors and Spanish people of my age that was creating things in the media. So to me was important because it was like the place where everybody was just sharing things and ideas and concepts and texts. So, and later when I published my first novel, my publisher was one of that persons who was writing in that blog. So at the end, we make like a network, and we know each other's work, and they know that what I was to write in Había una fiesta was something similar to the other texts. So I think that to me was, and you must think that when I wrote this novel, my first novel, I was in Sweden, so I have no contact with the people, the literature world here in Spain. So my only opportunity was internet, and continue sharing my experiences by social media or by articles or news that I was posting in my blog. So to me, it was the same thing, and I think that create texts is something individual that you must stay a lot of time alone at home writing and making you crazy because you are in a room alone with yourself, but at the end you are sharing with other people who's reading your texts. So in my case, the only difference was the media and the importance of the media in not in my work, because it's something individual, but in the publishing thing.
There's something that I find very interesting. I don't know your opinion on this, but I have the impression that we are living at a time where maybe due to the social media, but not only because of this, the ease with which we can grab a plane. It was not so easy 30 years ago, I can guarantee that. Also in the field of music, you could not find records. You had to go to France or to England. I was specialized in African music, and I had to travel a lot for this. And right now, I think that we have diluted the borders somewhat, not only the physical and real borders, but also the borders or the frontiers between the different genres. We all write poetry, but we all have tales, novels. In my case, I've written a short novel, and I think it's much more easier now to go to directly to what we want to tell and not to care so much about the way we need to do things from a formal way of thinking about it. Do you think our readers are somewhat different too? Does that make us different as readers? In the case of Marina, I think that you have partially answered my question, because you mentioned that the way that you're a writer is not the conventional channels that writers traditionally used. How do you see this? How do you both see this now?
Well, I think that you can have a great distraction with the media, because you have a lot of options and a lot of authors, and they are emerging all the time, and you can starting to compare your work with the others and something like that. But at the end, you can meet people who are creating things like you, and you can connect with them. So at the end, for example, when I was living in Sweden, all the authors that I meet there, people who was writing poetry. In that moment, there was a movement in USA that was called Adlit, with Taulin, with Noah Cicero, with Megan Boyle, and this literature movement went to Latin America, went to Spain, went to Sweden, and I started to meet people who was creating things that was related with the things that was creating too. So at the end, I could share with them some ideas and meet their poetry and start to translate this poetry to Spanish. And it's an influence to me, again, at the end, because this sharing, we always think that authors are only their thoughts, but they are their experiences too. So, and I think that in my writing, it's so important, the experiences that I could live, or the things that I could think. In Esta, for example, is the sexual abuse and the all this, how can I say it in English? This rules that the society put in yourself in the patriarchy. So at the end, I'm going with another place, but at the end, the experiences that you have in your life, you put it in your texts, and that experiences that you can live in the media are not the same that you the things that you can live in the real life, but they are connected and they make you think at the end.
Yeah, I was thinking that the question of how social media will, and not just social media, but as you said, the availability of everything, of music, and of it's so easy to access anything. How that will change both the reader, and because you have this sense that, for instance, students nowadays, I've heard my colleagues say that the students are very shocked when they have to read like books and or longer texts. Like your concentration span has kind of diminished with this constant, you can always click on something else. And I can sense that in myself, that I'm more impatient now, that when I sit with a book, I suddenly have to check my phone for a message or for an email, or maybe I have to check Instagram or something like that. It's the constant reward that you get, like when you kind of constantly check something, and how that has changed the reader and the concentration of the reader, and how that will that in any way have something to do with or change, or do you find the same changes in yourself as a writer? I don't have any answer to that, but I think it's interesting and to see how, for instance, television has had to adapt to its public in a quite radical way in the last only 5 years. I don't think that that's the case with literature, but at the same time, as you said, Lara, I think also the notion of genres is something that is much more fluctuant or moving now than it has been. Maybe that's just an idea, because maybe it's been quite not as solid as you'd like it to be all along. But for me as a writer, I've always been interested in that kind of intersection between the genres, how you can widen and stretch like the expectation of what a short story can do and what a novel can do. So for me, I'm just interested in it as perhaps interested as in literature. How will it affect literature? I don't have an answer. I just have guessings.
It's interesting that that aspect of the concentration, because when I was speaking with a lot of authors during the COVID, for example, that we have the only way to share with other people was the media. They say that they have a lot of noise of people saying things, and they cannot concentrate to write or to read. That reading is the most important thing to write better. And that was a problem to me, because if everybody's saying things and everybody is just speaking and saying what they are doing, and you are only listening that voice and not what you can do or concentrate in do one thing, you cannot write a text, or you cannot read a text of other person. So that's an interesting thing that you just say, and I think that it's a global problem.
Yeah, I think so too. Quite interesting, which has to do with not social media, but the pandemic, is how in Norway there has been a very strong growth of the diary. The diary has become like a very popular genre. There has been published, I think, several writers' diary for the last 2 years, and there's been a lot of debate in the media. Is this a good thing, or is it really bad that the writers just write the diary, what they're doing in the course of a day? But I think that's really very interesting, and I actually did write a diary text myself for an anthology about literature during the pandemic, because that was my only response. But that was also in the beginning of the pandemic, when you were so scared and you couldn't see what kind of consequences this would have on the future and your everyday life. So then the need to kind of document what was going on was much more powerful, perhaps in the beginning of the pandemic. But that would just I think you said something in the beginning, Lara, of how what happens in your life defines what you write, and that's something I think has been interesting to see, that this old genre, the diary, has come back with the pandemic. And also I think perhaps just a way of silencing all those voices that you were talking about, Marina. This silent room that you have when you can write down your thoughts, or what has happened during the day. So yeah, I don't know if you've had anything like that in Spain. Have you had any growth of the diary?
Yes, we have to. We had a lot of people. What the authors or people who was writing here and the literature will say, it was that we will have a lot of diaries of experiences of the pandemic, but at the end the curious thing, we start to see in some people's work nowadays, and it's not about the pandemic, it's about depression. And that's so interesting. I think that we will have a lot of books of depression and people who is watching inside and having a really connected voice with themselves. So I think that the new literature in Spain will be like something so spiritual at the end, or something really connected to the people. I don't know, and the depression, and cannot be connected because it's a topic, but it's not a topic that in the South we are like, so we are always in the street, or we say that we are always doing things outdoors. So when they put that, people only can stay with their own thoughts, and people thought a lot and people get crazy. So I think that the new literature will be not, we say at the beginning, we will read a lot of diaries, and at the end I see a tendency to speak about inside, not outside. So it's interesting, I think.
There's experience, narrative in first person, authors speaking in the first person, not necessarily only with diaries, but other genres, but narrators that we've chosen to be able to tell stories, these things that occur to other people. We could be those persons. We're not, well, we are doing fiction, but it is important to take into account the point of view of the writer that detaches and shares universal thoughts, feelings that have to do with our everyday. And those poems, are they yours? Well, I just lent that narrator, I lent her my lipstick. And if not, I wouldn't have been able to focus on fiction. How do you understand fiction? What do you talk about? Even if we're very close to reality nowadays, as we all are as contemporary authors, that we are constantly bombarded from the moment this writing has been generated. It is something that I wanted to mention, but I'm also interested by depth. We don't seem to have distance to be able to talk about what's happening right now, but things are going very quickly. We need quick answers. These are the times that we're living in. When are we going to have enough silence, enough space to be able to reflect? What is literature going to become in 15 years' time, for example? What's your opinion?
Okay.
La que quiera.
So
Yes, either.
I think that everybody lives the important things and they become universal, not for the experiences per se, for the way that we live them, so, or the way that we move against them. So at the end, I think that I always was interested in authors that the plot is not the important thing. The thing was the ideas that they talk about. So at the end, you ask if that universal or this self-reference thing. I think that we have a lot of authors nowadays that they are doing self-fiction, and I'm writing a self-fiction as a second novel. And it's not that I wanted to speak about myself. It's that I think that I have some experiences that could be universal, because all the people have at the end the same problems, that they are love, work, who we are here, what are we doing. So a lot of things that are common, and it depends of the people, or the person, that the characters at the end, no, the people that you're meeting. You have some situations or another. But we have. I think that I was interested in people who is just trying to understand that the problem that they live, they are not only individual, they are collective at the end, and we have all the same problems. And you can read a text from the past, and we have the same problems in a different way, but we continue having the same problems. And I think that in the contemporary we have some problems or some things that they are taking a lot of place in the thoughts of the people. But what I was interested or what interests me of other people's work is the way that they try to show it at the end, or what they think about that. And I think that it's everything I want to say about that. I don't know if you have the same problem, Gunnhild, or you see it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking about the relation between kind of the diary text and literature, because I think once you publish something, and if you write something with publication in mind, then that will change how you write. So I think that there is the moment your writing turns into literature, that is what makes it universal, I think. And it can come from your deepest self, but still it's about perspective, as Lara said, and it's also about that transformation that your ideas go through when they become language and they become literature. So for me, that I've been always writing or found freedom in writing, for instance, surrealist texts, or certain absurdism, I think. And I've always been asked about my relation to magic realism, which is something I haven't really read that much. but it's because my texts kind of operate in some kind of strange magical realism. Some of them, and more. The more I write, the more magical they become. So that kind of shift into a diary through the pandemic was very very clear to me that something had happened. But then at the same time, it wasn't just writing down for my own pleasure what I had been thinking. It was building a text when I was trying to finish it and making it ready for publication. Then it turns into literature still, but with the ring of the diary way of looking at the world, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I don't know if that was the question. Where we will be in 15 years time, I don't know. And I think it's very fascinating in Norway because we've had the autofiction for such a long time. It's been such a huge wave for 10 days, not just 10 days, but 10 years, more than that. And then I visited the seminar in Vienna, I think, in 2010, just at the beginning of the autofictional wave. And there were several academics there who said, oh, we will see a shift in Norway from now, around 2012, we will see a shift from the autofiction to the science fiction. There will become a very much more imaginative and fantasy-based literature. But that has happened now. So it's taken 10 years
well, maybe
for that kind of shift to come. But it's also, I think it's just incredibly interesting to see that when I was a student of literature, I was kind of always thinking, well, does it have to be like that? Does realism have to be alternated with romanticism, and does symbolism have to be alternated with kind of a more naturalist or realist way of writing? And now, after having lived through a couple of decades as a writer, I can see that that's actually something that happens, that there is a wave and that there's a reaction to the wave. So I don't know. I don't have an answer.
I love to know that after before 6 books of Nausgaard, of self-fiction, auto-fiction, and self Norwegian are tending to magic. It's a good thing, I think. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
As readers, do you also have a certain conviction with regard to a specific genre? Do you believe more in certain things that have drawn your attention during your life? Or can you be surprised as adult readers when we coexist between the reader that we were in the past and the reader that we can be in the future? Also referred to what I was saying before, depth, our capacity to experience the present, knowing how Heidegger said that we have been just thrown into the world, and we are finite beings. And are we aware of this? What is? Do you read differently as you get older?
I'm a really curious person, so I used to be surprised a lot of times. So I think it's not something that I'm gonna lose. It's true that when you become old and you start to read a lot, it's difficult to get surprised, or you become more critical with the texts. But at the end, I think I'm get surprised. I have pretty good surprises with young writers and with classics that I never read. So at the end, something that happened to me during the pandemic was that I reconnect with the topics that because I read a lot of new authors when I publish. I have like this experience to meet other people's works that are living nowadays here in Spain. But during the pandemic, I retake that magical type of books, or that thing that I enjoyed when I was a child, or I enjoyed when I was younger. And I think that if you become true to the things that make you happy reading, you enjoy reading, and you can put it in your texts. And at the same time, to be connected to what is people doing nowadays, or what is people saying, or how they work with the words, or what are they investigating, or this is the two ways, or the two channels that I used to read. So at the end, I like to read nowadays literature in Spanish. I like to read that topics, magical topics, or something like that I enjoyed when I was a child, and I try to be open to different kind of texts that I find that they have something interesting to say.
Yeah, me too. And I think my writing has gone through a couple of very important changes when I have read writers that have kind of opened the door for me, that I've kind of felt that there was something, but it was out of my reach, and then suddenly I read something and all clicks into place. Suddenly I know what to do, and that continues to happen. I have read a couple of writers the last few years that have really had a great impact on my writing. So it's I do hope that is something that will continue to happen, and that it's something that you learn as long as you're alive, because I think once you stop being able to learn, I think that's when you kind of reach the limit of your existence, actually. But I think it's interesting to see that I read things differently now that I'm older, that I can read things that I read when I was in my 20s and feel that there is so much that I didn't understand the first time I read the book, for instance, and that life helps you to see something in a different way. And I think I do not want to be 20 years again. some ways I would love to do it, but, no, but I'm just, it's very interesting to see, and I am interested in different things now. That I'm reading, for instance, now I'm reading Norwegian classic Sigrid Undset. She's one of 2 Norwegian writers who have been given the Nobel Prize of Literature, and I'm reading her main work, which is, I think it's called Kristin Lavransdatter. It's about a woman in who dies actually in the during the Great Plague in the 1300s in Norway. And when I was young and read this book, I was very interested in the love story when she was young. But this is a work that follows her through her life until she dies. So it's a huge work. And now I'm not very interested in the love story anymore. I'm not very interested in. I'm interested in her thoughts as she grows older, and that's because I'm growing older as well. So it's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's you, but when I'm writing nowadays, and if I select some book, it takes something about me, and I start to write like this book. So sometimes I prefer not to read so much when I'm writing, because if not, I start to write like this person that I'm reading, and I don't want to copy or do the same thing. So at the end, sometimes when I'm writing, I try not to read so much. I read when I finish, because if not, it's like something, it's like doing strange things in my mind.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. But then that was really my journey as a young writer. I was so determined that I would have to be completely original, that I couldn't read anything. So just to kind of make sure that it was, when I was writing, it came from myself. But then I had to, that's one of the huge transformations for me, that I realized what a stupid idea that was. that I actually had to read to understand how to write. But nowadays, I do understand what you mean, but I sometimes feel like if I start copying something, it's just a way of making my machine work, and then suddenly I forget what started it, and then it becomes my own just after a few kind of pages, or I just forget it. And I actually saw an interview with I forgot, Samantha, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Schweblin. I think she's Argentinian, and she said that she would kind of, in her writing, she would read as she was taking medicine, like, I need to read some Borges now, because I'm quite stuck. And then she would read the pages, and then she was okay again, and she could go on. And she would know exactly what kind of writers that was the right medicine for what kind of work she would do. And I really like that. I can understand that. I have that with Flaubert. I can, if I'm stuck, I can go to Madame Bovary, and I can read a little bit, and then, okay, it's the perspective. I'm missing the perspective. So I really, really enjoy the idea of reading as medicine.
Gunnhild sabrá.
Gunnhild Gunnhild probably knows that there's an exercise in writing schools that involve writing copying by hand the first chapters of your favorite novel, so that you can put yourself in that same spot. And I'm interested in knowing what you think about the proliferation of writing schools. I think that you can actually learn to write as you can learn any other skill if you're ready to do it and you invest the energy to learn it and you have that goal in mind. On the other hand, I wouldn't like to miss the idea that this event, Nordic Days, touches on many different fields, and I think that our trade is also touches to many fields as well. And I believe that this mix, or this loss of borders, is not happening everywhere. I've interviewed many musicians, for instance, who do not listen to other types of music, other genres of music, because they did not want to feel this influence from other styles. And I don't really know how to create without knowing what others are creating and learning about the creative process of other people. So I would like to ask you what you think about this, and what you think about all the influences that we get from music, from painting, from other types of arts. What's the percentage of energy that we should devote to other crafts, other arts? If you think that we need to do that, if there are some times where we are more ready to accept other influences, or if it's the same all the time.
Well, I can start with that. I think there were two questions there. One about the schools of teaching people to write, and then about receiving inspiration from other expressions of art. And I'll start with the last one. It's probably the same. Okay, no, I'll start with the first one, because I do think that going to school, I teach at the Academy of Creative Writing in Westland. And I think that one of the things that is so important by that is actually that you are forced to read 12 other or 11 other for the first year, and then 5 others for the second year, other writers' work. And you have to kind of broaden your perspective and broaden your mind about what, because they are very different. There is a cliche that about writers going to writer school, that you end up as the same writer, that you're kind of given the same impulses and you're taught by the same people, and then you end up as the same writer. But that's absolutely not true. I have been teaching for 20 years now, and if there's one thing that strikes me as true about these schools, is that students are very, very different, and they are very, very they don't agree at all. Many times there are huge and interesting discussions in the classroom. But I do think also that is a great place to start to get inspiration from your fellow writers. But then again, for me, I have to say all the time, talk from my own perspective, and that is that movies and art and music has always been very important to me, and it's almost just as important as literature, not in the respect of the writing itself, because that is something that comes from language, but when it comes to ideas or working with a material, building a universe, that is something that for instance, I was very inspired by Radiohead. Kid A, their legendary album. I was young when that was entered the world. So I was incredibly inspired by how they would let one song kind of slip into the next one, not just by making full stops between the songs, but then making kind of arches between the songs, and how they would develop themes. And I've been very inspired by Bach and his Goldberg variations, how you use repetition and variation through musical composition has been incredibly important to me. And in art, I mean, the Norwegian painter Munch, Edvard Munch, has been a huge inspiration. And a lot of other people. I won't mention them all, but I think that's I do try when I teach to bring in these different impulses to my students, and also to bring in as many different kind of texts as they can in that amount of time, just to make sure that the window is open. and also just there's always someone who will like something that someone else doesn't. So it's I don't know what you think about this, Marina.
Yes, I'm not the teacher, but at the end, I think that we're always teaching or learning when we are writing. I think that when you read or when you listen music or when you are watching movies, you are learning other ways to say things. And a lot of times you can listen, oh, everything is told, everything is done. You cannot say it a different thing, or you cannot say things in a different way. And at the end, that is the basis of literature or art, that the topic is the same all the time, but at the end it's your voice saying that, or your way to say that thing in that way. So at the end, I think that we are learning, and we are learning what other people is feeling. I have problems with wait.
Estamos casi
Wait.
llegando al...
We are almost near the end of our time today, but I would like to highlight that we could talk about being original, to go back to those works that helped us grow up and reread them again and again. I think that would be a very original way of adding up to our skills as writers, and we need to reinvent the way that writers have approached writing and creating literature, and we might reclaim the different ways that we can, as writers, be in the world. And regarding Radiohead, I would like to highlight that I wrote my first novel listening to Kings of Convenience in a loop. So I think that we all have some sort of musical room where you can get in and stay in. I think I might have listened to that album for about 10 million times. So we're reaching almost the end of our Nordic Days event, and this alliance between Nordic Days with the Embassy of Norway in Spain and NOLA and Espacio Fundación Telefónica. It's been a great pleasure to have this chat with you, Marina, Gunnhild, and I think we should already arrange our next meeting so we can talk about the coming projects. Marina, how's your second novel going? Is it going well?
Going well. It's going so slow, but it's going well. And it will speak about my experience in Sweden at the end. So I hope maybe next year or something like that, I have something to tell about Nordic culture and my experience there. So thank you so much for asking. But I'm just trying to put all that experience of my days in Norway nowadays, and I don't know which form it's taking, but it's going well.
Muy bien.
Thank you. I would also like to thank everybody in the crew behind this event. I think that all the crew members are wonderful, and I do not want to name maybe Laura's or Soles, but if I start naming people, that would be too long a list. But I would like to ask Gunnhild for her to wrap up this event. If you can tell us one thing that you would like for it to happen with literature. Now, since you're in touch with young writers, maybe not young in age, but new writers who are starting to deal with literature as a way of being present in this world, how would you like to, or what would be your key word? For instance, education, or how do you see a better future for literature in general?
I think I don't have a magical keyword, I think, but I think freedom is essential to be able to write. I think that I am not able to write unless I imagine myself completely free of any expectations of what I might do or should do. So I think that is the magical keyword anyway. That you have to be free to be able to write true and honest, which I do think are important guidelines for yourself, even though you're writing it as fictional or fantastical as you like. I think So, and that includes also the genre that you don't, it's the field should be opened and your writing should be free. It's like a flag, again, we're marching out. Your voice should be heard and it should be free. That's the, yeah.
I think that a better
Gracias
future
por
or
este
something like
encuentro, ha
that.
sido de verdad
Thank you for this meeting. Thank you. Would you like Marina to add something?
Ah, vale. Te veía ahí moviéndote. Bueno, nos abona.
Sorry, I saw you moving there. Yes, we really can sign up for that request for freedom when writing, and we just hope that this can be well received at the other end of the streaming, and that's this communication, which is the key, the basis for many experiences and for our own freedom, that this can be turned into a reality. Thank you very much.